science fiction book that deals with the protagonist named Horace Arthur Bates. I'll talk to you about three things. The first is the Brecht forum itself. The second will be to read from the book, and third, kind of, to talk about the themes in the book. I think Brecht said it more earnestly or more proper when he said, I think this is to paraphrase him, if Kazimbe can correct me, that in times of oppression, will they be singing? And the answer to that question was, he said yes. Now, given that that is my starting point for my book reading, I will begin by going backwards to a book of poems that I wrote. I came out 10 years ago, entitled The Songs of Soweto. And this will serve as an introductory to the reading of the novel itself. The introduction of the book of poems, The Songs of Soweto. To understand the world, William Faulkner once said, you have to understand a place, Mississippi. One loved a place, he wrote, not so much because of its virtues, but despite its faults. Perhaps I may also add to that observation and say, to further understand the world, one needs to understand Soweto, the southwest township in Johannesburg, South Africa. For it is here that the confluence of two cultures precariously collide. The continuity of tradition and the changing intellectual radicalism epitomized by the 1976 Soweto student uprising, where Afrikaans as a medium of instruction was rejected. Unlike in other places, the dialogue between the two cultures is ingrained in the parasitic world of meaning, in which the question, who and what am I, become a part of the uniqueness. In Soweto, the old and the new live together, with the old acting as a constant guide to comparative human experience. The young generation serves as a thrust and drive for idealism remotely grounded in the age-old youthism that the old has long done away with. And that served as the introduction to the Songs of Soweto. I'll read a poem from this book before beginning to give a presentation on the return to Gibraltar. This book was written at a time when I was accused by many people of writing very short poems. And I say the reason why I wrote these short poems was that after writing for a certain amount of time, you find that you don't have more to say, so you have kind of snippets that go and accompany the rest of what you have written. This is a poem I called A Conversation at Columbia School of Journalism. And it's just two lines, and it goes like this. If we bureaucratize our hearts, we will have nothing in common. And so this is the first, actually is the second collection of poems that came out 10 years ago, but I always kind of introduce my reading by going back to this, because I think this is where I came from. This is a place where I used as a springboard in my literary career and in my endeavors. The Return to Gibraltar is a science fiction novel, as many of you know, that deals with a young man by the name of Horace Arthur Bates, who time travels to Spain, 1491, to help the Moors of Spain. And Horace goes into Spain and he litigates for the Moors and reverses the outcome of the Spanish Inquisition. Now, the result of that is a change in the human behavior and in modern politics. But more so, it's a change of what Horace perceives as the human heart, the seeing or the quintessential eye that we use to, as humans, as kind of observe and carry forward. I will read a few segments, but first I'd like to begin by reading from the prologue. The law is the life. Sometimes life acts according to outcomes. The thought arose as Horace Bates began to speak, for now he assumed the full caricature of Mustafa al-Mutasid, the man he was impersonating. Your Lord Magistrate, we submit respectfully that the defendant has not committed the acts of treason, and that all this is a big mistake, said Horace. The magistrate, Thomas Sanchez, sat staring at Horace, unamused by the denial. You have the contempt of a man who has seen it before, the sully, dry-eyed look of disengagement. He interjected, Mr. Mutasid, it is my contention that your denial has been noted. Please continue. He did not want to offend the counselor at law, but he did not want to encourage him either. The evidence. At that moment, Horace was interrupted by the magistrate knocking his wooden hammer on the top desk. Today is just pleading. No evidence, please. Just plead, guilty or not guilty. You know, in our civil system, we have already presumed he is guilty, and your client must prove he is innocent. Yes. So enter your pleading, senor, said the judge. After contemplating whether he should ask the judge to throw the case out for lack of evidence, or merely enter a pleading, Horace said, at this moment, sir, your honor, we would like to have the case dismissed. Senor, you know the rules of our Spanish courts, don't you? We cannot dismiss a charge merely because you want it dismissed. The defendant must give us evidence of his innocence during trial. This is Spain 1491, and we do not dismiss cases here. This is the English law system. I am tempted to say, may I see your practice certificate, please? Horace stepped forward and handed over the pocket-sized book. The rest of the book had dated stamps and official notary. It read, Mustafa al-Mutasid, Abogado, admitted 1491 ACE. Horace handed the judge an impressive forgery. The judge looked at the perfectly torn piece of paper and looked on his back. Good, the judge said. But how come you seem lost, senor? Because this man is innocent, judge. He did not commit the treason he is being charged with. Maybe that's because you think he's innocent, protested the judge. The judge perused the certificate of practice for a second time, this time slower. You got this certificate only recently, senor. I can tell. That's why you are asking these questions. You are supposed to be a court-appointed counselor and not a court-appointed mistake. So that begins the book with Horace defending Rashid Muhammad and more in Spain, 1491. But Horace returns back to the United States His meddling with time and history has affected everyone. And so he has a moment when he realizes what he has done. Chapter 49. Horace landed on the airstrip in California at 6:30 in the morning, like a walk finding even ground. He had no problems landing. There was the usual tingling sensation of a new pilot's final moment. But Horace by now understood fully that Troy not only made concurrent calculations to any instruction, but that Troy searched for alternatives. He secured Troy, the heavy jet lifter, and headed towards Timmy for further instructions. He decided to take the LA Metro to Timmy's house in Orange County. He wanted to enjoy the cruising relaxation of moving motion. Something had been different on the return back to 2010 America, thought Horace, looking around as he walked away from the warehouse that now housed Troy. He was familiar with Palm Springs, California. Much of it was desert land, and then you had to catch a ride, hitchhike all the way to San Bernardino. From Bernardino, Orange County is another 100 miles. He was heading to Villa Park in the northern part of Orange City and prepared himself for a spacious welcome, something that includes jacuzzis and looking over into the mountainous cliffs of Southern California. But for now, he was in Coachella County, and you could hear the coyotes in the distance and smell the dried rot flown by vultures through the desert. The difference Horace had noted was in the dissimilar colors, the arrangement of colors. Something had changed. The arrangement of numbers had been reversed, and things looked backwards. For the long ride to Orange City, Horace bought the Santa Ana Times newspaper and started playing catch-up on local news. 2 weeks was enough time for him to lose track of events in current time. But the 2 weeks were actually 2 days in real time. I already missed the general, thought Horace, thinking about Rashid. In the train, it occurred to him that the train had only blacks in it, and Horace reluctantly asked the gentleman sitting next to him, "Where are all the white people?" The passenger, a burly gentleman in his mid-50s, looked at Horace and shook his head. "Don't you read the paper? Hey, you know who you remind me of? Mustafa, Rashid's lawyer in 1491, that jawline. He became the first advisor to the Moorish kingdom." Still, Horace was frozen. What's in the paper? Do I also have to wipe the crumbs off your mouth? Horace looked away, making sure that the words rubbed off. Okay, let me spell it out. Their leader, Marty Kenny, was making trouble, the leader of the whites, so we banned white people from riding trains. You banned white people from riding trains? It's about time, I tell you. We should ship them back to Europe. If you ask me, they are just wasting our time here, said one passenger. Horace did not know how to make this gratuitous jab, at white people. He did not appreciate any form of racism, and so he said, "Come on, man, it's one person at a time, you know." The man seemed to be irritated by the suggestion that people should be taken it one at a time. "Look, one at a time, my ass, man." Horace sank deeper into his seat, and it finally dawned on him. A reversal had just occurred. Black people were now oppressing white people. He decided to double-check his discernment. "Excuse me, I don't mean to bother you, but is the leader of the whites Dr. Martin Luther King?" Horace asked. "Either you high on drugs or you just a dumbass. What's your problem, man?" "Nothing," Horace said. The man got up and started walking to another seat. He said, "I am changing my seat. Good luck." Then, just as upright and as cunning as a fox, the stranger left the train. As the stranger was leaving, he uttered the words, "Their leader is Marty Kenny. You were almost correct. That Marty Kenny fellow is a very dangerous man." And I don't want to read the whole book. take any questions, Kazambe, Max, and then we can call it a night.
What made you write about the return to Gibraltar?
Well, that's an interesting question, Kazambe. The picture that you see here is a picture by, let me get his name correct, Edward Claremont, excuse me, an Austrian. And this picture, the original, is in the Philadelphia Museum of Art, and I got their permission to use it on my book. And it's this very magnificent picture of a Moorish general taken out from that era in time. That picture inspired me to kind of look at the interface between how an African American would probably relate to the history and the problems that the Moors were dealing with, and how an African American could probably project his own worldview and his solutions on the problems taking place. So I was inspired by that picture to kind of begin writing a novel. And I know it seems very difficult to imagine, but I think it's true. A picture is worth more than 1,000 words.
How would you define the concept of science fiction?
It's interesting. I think science fiction is, look at Avatar, you look at Star Wars. The concept, it's a very interesting question. The concept, for me, it's a narrative tool that is being used to tell a greater story that I think as humans or as cultures or any way you want to look at it, we don't have all the narratives. So I think science fiction is an attempt to kind of make something more holistic, kind of finish off the rough edges. I mean, Avatar, for example, those of you who saw Avatar, even though it's sci-fi, I think you would agree that if Steinbeck had written a novel and attempted the same thing, or if someone, Norman Mailer, had attempted the same thing, just writing a straight-out literary fiction book, that the story wouldn't have come across the same. That sci-fi as a concept is I think, a narrative tool that should be employed to kind of go and retell stories and find and kind of flesh out some of the stories that I think we're struggling to tell as as storytellers.
What kind of stories are you, as author, primarily concerned with telling?
I think I don't aim to tell black stories. I don't aim to tell white stories. I'm trying to develop kind of a humanistic commonality, something that I think you get in any culture, you get in any people. And some of the things even that Horace Bates realizes as I read through is that even if you change the position and the color in that position, you haven't changed anything. A real change is something that he learns without giving away the book. He learns the hard way that he's more than calculus. It has to deal with a lot of detail that you have to kind of be willing to give. So to answer your question in brief, I'm just aiming at telling stories that kind of connect people and can bring people to the same table, as opposed to entertaining one group of individuals.
I was wondering if you had shared any relationship or influence by some of the other African American or Black science fiction writers like Octavia Butler or like Samuel Delaney.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I try to stay away from other people's work, and this is the reason why, because for some reason, when you're writing, it's almost humanly impossible to decide how your subconscious is going to act. And if you read a lot, I didn't read any time travel, I didn't read the H.G. Wells time try to stay away from that, because what happens is that as you're writing your story, you absorb so much. So I probably now will start to look at it when I have my own work, which is not really drawing from anything, either consciously or subconsciously. I'll start to partake in that. But even I say to other, authors that ask me for advice, that be careful about, how much you kind of read, be in your preparation. If the story should be there, and you write it and then you research after the story. If you're researching too much, or if you read too much and get inspired too much by other people's work, that work has a way of finding itself in your book. So, I guess in terms of concluding statements, what people can kind of get from here in the Brecht Forum with what is done here in terms of offering social criticism, and I thought about this a lot. I was hoping that this whole room would be filled when I prepared this talk, but God is the one who decides things, so this is fine. I thought this book, and it's interesting that I discovered this after writing the book. And most people say, well, I'm writing this book about blah, blah, blah. And Stephen King says this in a book he wrote called On the Art of Writing, I think something of that nature, that the book you set out to write is not the book you end up writing. And this book, when I read it to myself and I read it over and over again, it seems to me it's more about coexistence. I never set out to write a book that deals with coexistence of different religions. Like Horace is primarily a Christian, he's a Christian, and it interacts with the Islamic world. And he's comparing, and so that is something that probably here at the Brecht Forum can be interesting, that aspect of coexistence of the religions that Horace Pace deals with.